it's Monica, and it is finally that time of year again. Today I went through and browsed my shelves to find a selection of books that I am just so excited to read this autumn. I always love doing this at the beginning of each season because it allows me to be really intentional about my reading, and it also just makes me really excited for a new season and new books. So I'm so excited to talk about the books that I have for you today. But before I do that, I want to give a big shout out to this video's sponsor, which is Book of the Month Club. Book of the Month is a popular online book service with a mission to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover books they love. Every month, they vet hundreds of books to give readers a curated selection of new and early release titles at the best possible price. This month's picks are The Last Story of Mina Lee, a contemporary fiction following a Korean-American woman learning about her mom after her suicide. Anxious People, a comedy following a would-be bank robber and 8 extremely anxious people. Caste, a non-fiction that examines the unspoken caste system in America. Transcendent Kingdom, the highly anticipated second novel from the author of Homegoing. And lastly, Winter Counts, a dark crime novel set on a Native American reservation that Tommy Orange called a brilliant meditation on power and violence. And the great thing about Book of the Month is that once you're signed up, if you decide you're not interested in a certain month's picks, you're able to skip easily without being charged. I'll have a link down below where you can learn even more about Book of the Month. I highly recommend checking out the synopses for each of the books that were picked for this month because they sound amazing, and you can use the code SOGOOD in order to get your first book for only $9.99. So now I'm going to talk about the books that I am just the most excited to pick up this autumn, and this first one would 100% be on this list regardless of whether or not Book of the Month sponsored it, and it's Transcendent Kingdom by Jessie. I have been looking forward to this book since I first read Homegoing so many years ago, and this one just looks and sounds amazing. So basically this story is set in the modern day American South, and we follow a family that has immigrated from Ghana, and they have been ravaged by depression, addiction, and grief. Our main character is studying neuroscience, and after the passing of her brother and her mother being confined to her bed because of her depression, she turns to science in order to try and figure out how to save her family and cure them of everything that has happened to them. She also finds herself working through the trauma of growing up in a conservative evangelical church. And again, I loved Homegoing so much. This, like, when I saw this in the box that Book of the Month sent me, I let out a full shriek because I've been so excited for this one. The next book I'm hoping to pick up is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I recently read Heartstopper Volume 1 and it was so good. I feel like this is her most famous novel and the one that people always recommend to me, so I'm really excited to dive into it. Honestly, the synopsis for this one sounds really vague both on the book and on Goodreads, so I didn't want to do much more digging into the plot than that because I didn't want to spoil myself. But from what I understand, this book follows basically our main character who is in high school, and she's always lived her life to like be that high achiever and has seen, you know, getting good grades and doing well academically as sort of the pinnacle of living a good life. And this explores her sort of learning that maybe that's not the case, and that is definitely something I find relatable from my own time in high school and college. So I'm really excited. I need to think of a different word than excited. So I'm definitely really intrigued to see how that's handled in this novel. Then I want to pick up The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I know I haven't read this one. Wild. Haha. But yeah, I haven't read this one, and I have a friend group and we've all been wanting to like read more classics together, and I think this might be the one we're reading in autumn. It might not be, but regardless, I do want to read it this autumn because I've never read it, and I am really fascinated by the whole mythology of Dorian Gray. Like I just think it's a really interesting story. Basically, Dorian Gray, if you aren't familiar, he sells his, I think he sells his soul to the devil, or he makes a pact with the devil to never age and to be immortal. So he gets this painting that is of himself, but the painting is the one who does all the aging, and it just sounds very fascinating to me. Honestly, every time I've heard that synopsis, I've always been like, so what's the problem? So I'm really interested to see what the problem is. I'm sure it's very sad, and there is actually a problem. But I mean, like, selling your soul to the devil sounds maybe not like the best life choice, but I also love the back of the blurb. It says, wild about the boy. Dorian Gray might be as pretty as a picture, but he's paid a devilishly high price for it. He'll stay drop dead gorgeous, but there's something nasty festering in the attic. So I don't know, I just love that blurb, and I'm really excited to finally read this one. It's also very short, like it's like 250 pages, and I think that was like with an introduction or something. Then I feel like autumn is the season of dark academia, so I had to pick 2 dark academia books to read, and they are Sleepwalking, let me flip this over, Sleepwalking by Meg Wolitzer, and Bunny by Mona Awad, and both of these sound just fantastic. Sleepwalking, I just need to read this little bit to you. Sleepwalking tells the story of the 3 notorious death girls, so called on the Swarthmore campus because they dress in black and are each absorbed in the work and suicide of a different poet, Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, and Wolitzer's creation, Lucy Asher. So yeah, that honestly sounds like my old Tumblr days. Which is half the reason why I'm so excited for this book. And also, I love dark academia. It's like the perfect genre, I feel like, for autumn, and I'm really fascinated with this. Also, those poets, Anne Sexton, Sylvia Plath, 2 of my absolute favorites. I don't care if that's basic, I love their poetry, and I'm really intrigued to see how this book depicts them and depicts these death girls who honestly sound like icons. Then Bunny by Mona Awad follows a group of these rich girls who are all blonde, and they all refer to each other as Bunny, and I've heard it compared to like Heathers but dark academia. Sounds weird. Totally compelled to read this one. Have been really excited to read it ever since I got it recently. So I'm very excited to do that. Then I want to read Edinburgh by Alexander Chee. This is a book that's been on my TBR for a really long time. This is a book that is on my Korean shelf on my TBR. Alexander Chee is a Korean author, and I've been wanting to read one of his novels for so long. I feel like he's such a classic name within the literary space. This novel follows a 12-year-old Korean American boy named Fee, he's the leader of the Sopranos in his church choir, and he discovers that the director of this choir abuses the different section leaders, and he feels so much shame in this that he ends up not telling anybody, and eventually one of his friends ends up committing suicide after facing this abuse. And so Fee ends up having to grapple with both this trauma that he has been exposed to, and also this like sense of guilt because he didn't, get help. And it sounds like a really difficult read, but also I've heard that this book is beautiful and so many friends have read it and loved it, so I'm definitely hoping to get to it this autumn. These next 3 I actually talked about in a video that I did, I think back in April. It was my 5-star reading predictions, and I've done such a good job of reading so many of the books that I mentioned in that video. So basically it was a video all about like books that I think I am just going to absolutely love, and I haven't read them yet, and so I set myself the goal of trying to read as many as possible this year, and I'm very proud that I've actually been working towards that goal. So I'm still hoping that sometime close to the end of the year I can do a full wrap-up where I talk about most of the books. There are a couple that I've kind of taken off my TBR since then, but for the most part where I could talk about most of the books in that video and just reflect on if I overhyped them for myself or not. But yeah, I'm gonna dive into the 3 that I'm hoping to read this autumn, and they are Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is a sci-fi novel. It takes place on this planet where these humans have formed a colony there. They basically got into this big battle with an alien race, and during this battle our main character's father runs away and he is branded a coward, and his family is then there's just like all this shame put on his family. And so our main character, Spencer, wants to try and prove her family is not a bunch of cowards, and she wants to become a pilot in order to fight the aliens, and she is fighting basically against this system that doesn't want her anywhere near the whole like pilot realm, because that's sort of like the top tier in her society and she's at the bottom. I have started this one already and I'm hoping to definitely finish it this autumn because I loved as much as I read. I also love like space academy stories, you know, so it's right up my alley. Also from that list was Cersei by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of the Odyssey, but we specifically follow Cersei, who is sort of a side character within that whole story. And she's a witch who has been banished to this island, and it's her life story. This is one that so many people I know have read and loved, so I've been wanting to read it for years. I think I've definitely put this on like multiple TBRs. So I've said this before probably, but I really hope to read it this autumn. It's one that I'm always like, yeah, I need to read that this season. Like I feel like every season I'm like, Cersei, I'm gonna read Cersei, and then I don't. So maybe this autumn will be different. We'll check back in like November and we'll find out. And then the last book that I'm planning on reading from that 5-star reading predictions list is The 13th Tale. This is by Diane Setterfield, and it just looks like autumn in a book. And honestly, if you've read this one, definitely tell me if I sound totally off base, but this one sounds like a gothic, magical Evelyn Hugo. Am I wrong? Basically, we follow Vita Winter. She is this reclusive, famous author who has written these various stories that are supposedly her life story, and each one is sort of wilder and more magical than the next. And so she's finally willing to tell the truth, and so she brings this young biographer to come to her house where she will tell her the truth of her life. I love stories where someone is also telling a story. Gives me like ever after vibes, you know? So I'm really excited for this one, and it just looks so beautiful. This is another one that I did start, I think, like right when I first filmed that video, but I didn't end up finishing it because honestly, this is such an autumn book. Like it just wasn't the right time to read it at the beginning of summer. The last book that's on my autumn TBR is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. I've been waiting to read this one until the new one, the second book, was out because I know it's a duology. I wanted to read the duology all together because I have my old roommate Kaylee read the first one and just freaked out so much about the ending that I was like, okay, I need both before I can commit to this read. But I've been really excited to read this one because I really look up to Hank Green as a creator and a voice on the internet, and so I've been really interested to see just like what a novel from him would be like. I know this one explores ideas of what it means to go viral, but then there's also like aliens. Sounds really fascinating. We have our main character who she basically goes super viral because she documents the corals, and they are these like statues, mysterious statues that just appear. And yeah, I don't know, it just sounds really interesting and unlike anything else. So it's definitely one I want to pick up this autumn, and then maybe I'll do the second one in the winter. We'll see. But yeah, those are the books that I'm planning on reading this autumn. I'd love to hear from you guys about what you're excited to read this autumn, or if you've read any of these ones, let me know your thoughts, but please no spoilers. And I'm gonna do, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I am gonna do a video where I talk about my most anticipated releases for the rest of the year, so you can look out for that. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you again to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. I'll have again that link in the description box below and the code so you can get your first month for $9.99, and I'll talk to y'all next time. Bye.